My name is Tayana. I'm 28 years old. And the night I came home from training, I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped inside. The air was heavy. My living room lights were on. And then I saw them. My father was sitting in my chair like he owned the place, whiskey on his breath, his fist pounding the armrest hard enough to make the glass table shake. Behind him stood my brothers, Marcus and Derek, their jaws tight, their knuckles flexing like they were seconds away from striking. Family takes care of family, my father growled. You've got money now. Sponsorships. Contracts. Don't forget where you came from. You owe us. The sound of his voice sent fire racing down my spine. Because I had seen this look before, the same clenched fist, the same veins bulging in his neck. The last time I was 18, standing in that broken-down kitchen, begging him not to hit my mother. He turned on me instead, and for the first time in my life, I raised my own hand to stop him. His knuckles caught my cheek. My blood hit the floor. That was the night I ran. The night I swore I would never let him touch me again. And now here he was, in my home, looking at me like that terrified teenager still lived inside me. But he didn't know. That girl was gone. Because walking out of his house didn't just save me, it made me stronger, faster, sharper. It made me someone he could never break again. Before I tell you how I made sure my father and brothers regretted ever stepping into my home, and what I did with the mother who chose him over me, I want to ask you. Have you ever had family try to take from you, just because they thought you were still too weak to fight back? Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe, because this isn't just a story about money. It's the night I stopped being their victim. I was once a girl who fell asleep to the sound of bottles breaking against the wall, to my mother's muffled sobs behind the bedroom door, and to my father's voice, slurred, angry, louder than thunder. My childhood smelled like sweat, rust, and cheap whiskey. My father worked at the plant, and every night he came home with his boots covered in grease and his breath already sour with beer. His hands were cracked and scarred, his jaw clenched like the world owed him a debt. No one dared ask how his day had gone. My brothers, Marcus and Derek, just looked at each other, kept quiet, and waited for the storm to pass. My mother rushed to hide the dishes and glasses, knowing one wrong word could send them flying across the kitchen. Being the youngest meant I was the easiest target. Not because I was the worst kid, but because I was there, small, defiant, the only girl. My father's favorite line was burned into me long before I was old enough to understand it. A woman needs to know her place. His place was the factory. My mother's place was the cash register at the corner store, then the stove at home. And my place? Beneath his temper, beneath his rules, beneath his eyes whenever I dared to dream. Marcus and Derek adored him. They were his shadows, eager to be men the way he defined it, loud, aggressive, careless. When he barked, they stood taller. When he mocked me, they smirked. They laughed at me when I cried, called me soft, told me I'd never matter outside of a man's shadow. Sometimes they shoved me forward into his anger, just to watch how much I could take. But I could run. At first, it was just running away, from shouts, from fists, from chaos. Then it became something else. Running turned into the only time I felt free. Barefoot in the cracked streets, in beat-up sneakers so thin my toes scraped the asphalt, I could leave the house behind. The faster my feet hit the pavement, the quieter his voice became. Out there, on the track behind the high school or circling the block under dim streetlights, I wasn't anyone's punching bag. I was just speed and breath and survival. It was my high school coach, Mr. Langston, who saw it. He caught me one afternoon after gym, sprinting the track in shoes that were splitting at the seams. "Girl, you're faster than half my boys," he said, squinting at the stopwatch. "What's your name again?" "Tayana." "Well, Tayana, you keep running like that, you'll have more than just blisters to show for it." From that day, I started training with him in secret. At 15, I signed up for my first real meet. I told my father I was staying late at school for extra tutoring. In truth, I was running on borrowed spikes under stadium lights, my heart pounding louder than the crowd. I remember standing at the starting line, my legs shaking, staring down the lanes. When the gun went off, the world blurred. By the time I crossed the finish line in third place, lungs burning, I clutched a bronze medal that felt heavier than gold. I didn't dare bring it home. I tucked it into my backpack, then later hid it under my mattress. That medal was my secret rebellion, proof that I was building a life no one in my family could see. For the next 3 years, I lived a double life. At home, I was the obedient daughter who worked shifts at the store with my mother and kept her head down when my father's temper flared. At school, I was the girl who never stopped shaving seconds off her time. Every week there was another meet, another ribbon slipped into my backpack before I caught the late bus home. The bus rides were their own kind of torture. I'd sit pressed against the window, medals clinking faintly inside my bag, while kids joked loudly about their parents cheering from the stands. I envied them more than I could admit. My family never came to watch me run. They didn't even know I was out there. By 16, whispers about me had spread beyond our small town. Coaches from other schools knew my name. I was running the 400 and 800 meters against girls 2 years older and leaving them behind. Scouts started showing up at the meets, scribbling notes when I ran. One even stopped me in the hallway after a race and said, "Kid, you've got college speed. Don't waste it." That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, the words repeating over and over. College speed. A future that looked nothing like the one waiting at home. But the idea of college felt dangerous. Nobody in my family had ever gone. My father always said education was for soft hands. My brothers agreed, bragging about how real men made their living with sweat and steel. I knew if I told him about scholarships, he'd laugh in my face, or worse, forbid me to go. And if he forbade it, it would mean chains. So I kept quiet. I ran harder, faster, as if my silence could buy me freedom. I filled out applications late at night under the covers, lying about homework assignments so my mother wouldn't ask questions. My coach signed papers in secret, nodding at me like we both knew this was war, not schoolwork. When the acceptance letter finally came, with the words full athletic scholarship stamped in bold, I held it in my hands like contraband. My fingers trembled as if the paper might vanish if I blinked too long. I locked the bathroom door, sat on the cold tile floor, and read it again and again, tears spilling down my face. But joy quickly turned into fear. I couldn't let my father see it. Knew what he'd say, that I wasn't leaving, that his only daughter wasn't running off to live some fantasy, and that I belonged under his roof until he said otherwise. And I knew the threat behind those words wasn't empty. So I hid the letter under the floorboard of my room, beside the shoebox of medals I'd never dared to show him. I carried its secret weight every day, waiting for the moment I could finally run, and not come back. I waited until summer to tell them. By July the heat sat heavy over the neighborhood, the kind that made curtains stick to windows and tempers rise with the cicadas. I kept the scholarship letter in my backpack wherever I went, as if carrying it on my body could keep it safe, as if paper had a pulse that could sync with mine. Every day I rehearsed the words in my head, "I'm leaving in the fall. I earned this. I'm going." I practiced saying them while I ran laps in the evening, matching syllables to footfalls, breath to courage. I chose a Thursday. My father's schedule changed that week, he'd be on second shift and home late. I pictured telling my mother at the table first, calmly, while she folded receipts from the store. She would see the seal and the congratulations and she would finally say it, "Go." Maybe she'd even come with me. Maybe we would share a silence that wasn't fear. But the plant had other plans. He was home before sunset, earlier than I'd seen him in months, shouldering through the door like a storm breaking. He didn't just close it, he made the house feel smaller. The smell hit first, whiskey, sweat, the metallic edge of fury. Marcus and Derek came in after him, faces already tense, as if they'd been drafted into a war on the ride back. "What happened?" my mother asked, voice already paper thin. He didn't answer. He threw his lunch pail across the kitchen. It clanged against a chair and fell open, bologna sandwich skidding on the floor. He leaned both hands on the table and breathed like a bull. "The plant cut me," he said finally, low and flat, the kind of tone that meant the earthquake hadn't happened yet. 30 years. 30. My mother reached for his arm as if one touch could rewind the day. He jerked away. A bottle appeared from his jacket like a magic trick he'd practiced for decades. The first swallow was long. The second was the warning. "We'll figure it out," she whispered. "Maybe your supervisor." "Supervisor?" He laughed without humor. "They don't listen to men like me. Not anymore. They listen to college kids who never lifted a wrench. That's who they listen to." His eyes slid to me like a spotlight. It would have been smart to disappear then, take the stairs quietly, let the night pass, live to choose a better moment. But hiding was a language my legs were done speaking. I pressed my palms into my backpack to feel the edges of the letter. I thought of September, the dorm, the track, the future that had my name printed on it. If I didn't tell them now, I never would. "Daddy," I said. The word felt smaller than I did. "I need to talk to you and Mom." He took another swallow. "What for?" "It's important." Marcus smirked. "Girls got group project drama." Derek snorted. "Probably wants the car." My mother's hand trembled where it still hovered in space. "Not now, T. He's upset." "I'm leaving in the fall," I said, opening the backpack. My heart thudded so loud I could barely hear my own voice. I slid the envelope out like contraband. I got a full athletic scholarship. Housing, meals, everything. Coach Langston helped with the forms. I'm going. The room changed temperature. The fan still spun. The cicadas still screamed outside. But the air inside our kitchen turned into glass. He stared at the letter as if it had sworn at him. "You," he said slowly, "are not going anywhere. It's already done." My voice shook. I hated that it shook. "I earned it." His mouth twitched. "Earned?" Marcus leaned on the doorframe. "Told you she thought she was special." Derek grinned. "Running in circles pays bills now?" My mother sank into a chair. "Tiana." I kept talking, because stopping would mean crumpling. "This is real. The coach called me, there's a place on the team. I can train. I can study. They want me." He set the bottle down and it made a sound like a gavel. "I am your father. You live under my roof. You don't want things I don't put on the table." I'm 18. My hands were shaking, but I kept them visible, palms up, as if surrender could be read as strength. "I'm allowed to go." "Allowed?" The word cracked open something inside him. "Who allows me?" He looked to my brothers to make sure the answer was no one. Marcus nodded. Derek folded his arms. "Jury, judge, executioners, all in the family." I turned to my mother because I had to. "Please," I said. "Tell him this is right. Tell him this is my chance." Her eyes were wet, her mouth a thin, frightened line. She looked at me the way she looked at receipts when the register didn't balance, searching for what didn't add up. "It's not a good night, baby. Let him rest. We can talk tomorrow." "There won't be a tomorrow if he decides there isn't," I said. "There never is." He moved then, not a step, just the shift of a shoulder, the flare of a nostril, the barely visible tightening of a fist on the table's edge. It was a prelude I knew by every nerve in my body. He didn't have to raise his voice. He didn't even have to stand. He could crush a day with a look. "You think you're better than this house," he said. "No," I said, steady for once. "I think I'm better outside it." The silence that followed felt like the moment before the starting gun, time stretched tight as wire, breath suspended. If he'd laughed, maybe it would have diffused. If Marcus had cracked another joke, maybe the spell would have broken. But there was only the soft tick of the clock and the sound of skin creaking over knuckles as his hand curled. He reached for my mother first. It was automatic, as old as our wallpaper. A grab at the wrist to ground himself, to remind the room whose rhythm we all kept. She flinched before he touched her, flinching had become her second heartbeat. "Don't," I said. It wasn't loud, but it was a word I'd never said to him like that. Not a plea, not a whimper. A line. The chair scraped. He rose. The room lost its ceiling. "Who do you think you are?" he asked. The girl who hid medals under mattresses. The runner who learned to breathe through fire. The child who counted exits the way other kids counted sheep. I didn't say any of that. "I'm leaving," I said. "And I want her to come." He moved fast, faster than a man who'd spent 30 years on a factory floor had any right to move. His hand shot out, not a punch, not yet, but the same motion that had always started everything. His fingers closed around my mother's forearm and she made that small sound I knew too well, the one that said pain had stopped being a surprise years ago. I stepped between them. There was no plan in it. My body just did what it had always done, choose the lane with the most danger and run it anyway. My shoulders met his chest. I felt the heat of his breath, the tremor of fury vibrating through him like a machine about to tear itself apart. "Let her go," I said. Marcus straightened. Derek pushed off the wall. The kitchen shrank until the light over the table felt like interrogation. He looked down at me as if I were a wall that had grown legs. "Move," he said. No. It was such a small word to hold such a large thing. For a heartbeat we were statues. Then his hand came across, not a full swing, not the kind that ends with a hole in the wall. The kind designed to sting and warn, a bite before them all. My cheek went hot. The room tilted like a carnival ride. Somewhere far away my mother said my name in a way that made it sound like a prayer. I tasted metal. I blinked until the room steadied. And then I did the one thing he had never expected from his girl. I didn't cry. I didn't apologize. I didn't move. "You don't touch her," I said. Something broke. Maybe it was the bottle when he slammed it down, maybe it was a nerve in my neck, maybe it was just the last thin string tying me to the idea that this house could ever be home. My mother tried to slide her arm free, he tightened. The old dance. "Come with me," I said to her, eyes on his, because looking away would be giving ground. "Now. Tonight. I have a place to go. We can be gone before midnight. I'll run if I have to. You and me." She stared at me like the little girl I used to be had walked into the room and asked for a bedtime story. Her lip trembled. She looked at his hand on her arm. She looked back at me. "I can't," she whispered. The words landed softer than the slap and hurt more. "You can," I said. "You walk. You step past him, and you don't look back. I will take care of the rest." "I love him," she said, almost apologizing. "He's my husband. I'm your daughter." Tears spilled but her face didn't change. She was practiced at crying quietly. "It's not that simple." "It is," I said, and the truth of it cut, because I heard the selfishness in it too. I wanted it to be simple because I needed it to be. "It's a choice. Him or me." The room pulled tighter. The fan clicked. Outside, a car passed and the headlights slid over the ceiling like a small, brief miracle. No one breathed. She looked at me with oceans in her eyes and chose the shore she knew. "I'm staying," she said. My brothers exhaled, triumph, relief, boredom, who knows. My father's grip loosened by a fraction, the tiniest victory handed to him by a woman who kept giving him her life as if it were a bill paid monthly. Something inside me cooled. Not froze, frost is kind. This was a cooling like steel in water, a tempering. The sting in my cheek dulled to a pulse. The letter in my pocket weighed nothing and everything. "Okay," I said. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and it came away red. Then this is my last night here. I turned toward the hallway. Marcus stepped into the doorway like he might block it. I met his eyes and he looked away first. I took the stairs that had always creaked under the weight of secrets, pulled the loose board in my room, and slid the envelope out along with the shoebox of cheap metals that meant more than gold. I put on my running shoes, the soles thin, the laces frayed. I slung a small backpack over one shoulder. I looked around the room that had never been mine and said goodbye without a sound. When I came back down, he stood where I'd left him, a monument to a country I was no longer a citizen of. My mother's eyes tracked every movement like she was memorizing me for the times she would need to pretend I'd never existed. "Don't come back," my father said, an old curse he reused for every enemy he invented. I met his gaze and found nothing to take with me. "I won't," I said. I opened the door and the heat leapt at my face. Behind me, the bottle tipped and rolled. Somewhere in another life, a girl cried. In this one, a woman stepped onto the porch and into the night, the streetlights marking a lane only she could see. I ran, not away, not this time. Toward. I left that night with nothing but a backpack, a box of medals, and the letter that promised me freedom. 10 years later, I had everything my father swore I would never touch. College was the first battlefield. The dorm smelled like fresh paint and cheap soap, the kind of scent that clung to new beginnings. My roommates asked about my family during those first weeks, and I learned to lie easily. "They're proud of me," I'd say, while I traced the bruise-shaped memory on my cheek and shoved the shoebox of ribbons under my bed. On the track, though, I didn't have to lie. My body spoke louder than words. The first meet of freshman year, I came out of the blocks like a girl chased by every ghost I had ever known. By the 400-meter mark, the world behind me had vanished. I finished first, lungs raw, legs burning, and the stadium roared. Not for me as a daughter, not for me as a sister. For me as an athlete. For me as Tayana. By sophomore year, people in the NCAA started whispering my name. Flash. That's what the announcers called me, a nod to the blur I left behind when I sprinted. The nickname followed me through heats and finals, through championships where my times dropped lower than I believed possible. Every victory was a defiance, every medal a receipt stamped with the truth, I had made it out. But freedom wasn't free. I worked 2 part-time jobs, stocking shelves at dawn, tutoring kids in the evening, because scholarship dollars stretched thin. I learned to eat ramen with protein powder stirred in, to ice my knees with frozen vegetables when the trainer's office closed early. I sent half of every paycheck home. I told myself it was for my mother, even if the checks were cashed without so much as a thank you. By 21, scouts started circling. At one regional meet, a man in a USA track and field jacket leaned over the railing after I'd shattered my personal best. "You've got professional legs," he said, pressing his card into my palm. "Call me when you're ready to stop running for free." 2 years later, I signed my first contract. Nothing glamorous, no $1 million endorsements, no billboards. But it paid rent, it covered gear, and it put my name on a roster beside athletes I'd watched on TV. My father would have sneered. My brothers would have mocked. But none of them were there to stop me. I bought my first apartment at 25. Small, modern, tucked in a neighborhood where no one knew my story. The day I signed the papers, I stood in the empty living room, sunlight spilling across hardwood floors, and whispered, "This is mine." No one could lock me out. No one could raise their hand and call it love. I tried to share that with her. Every holiday, I mailed a check to the old address. A piece of my winnings, folded with a note, "I hope you're okay. Call me." Sometimes I wrote more, "I miss you. I wanted you there. I still want you here." The checks always cleared. The silence always stayed. I called too, from payphones at first, later from hotel rooms across the country. Sometimes the line rang until it died. Sometimes Marcus picked up and laughed before hanging up. Once Derek answered and said, "She doesn't want to talk." His voice was flat, like he was reading a grocery list. But she never spoke. Not one word in 10 years. So I ran louder. I ran harder. I won races in Chicago, Los Angeles, even a qualifier in Berlin that paid me more in a weekend than my father had made in months at the plant. I signed a sponsorship deal with a shoe company that printed my name in glossy catalogs. Strangers stopped me at airports to ask for autographs. In my circles, I was someone. And yet, every finish line felt like a door without a key. I'd cross first, hands in the air, the stadium chanting my nickname, and still find myself scanning the crowd, searching for a face that would never come. By 28, I had closets full of trophies, a car in my own name, a bank account that would have silenced my father's doubts forever. But none of it drowned the fact that in a decade of victories, my mother had never called back. Not once. The checks kept clearing. The silence kept answering. And I learned that sometimes the loudest no in the world is the one spoken with nothing at all. I came back from training drenched in sweat, keys cold in my hand, already thinking about dinner and ice for my knees. But when I reached my apartment door, my stomach dropped. The lock was splintered. The frame hung crooked. It looked less like someone had tried to open it and more like someone had kicked their way through. For a second, I thought it was a break-in. I imagined strangers rifling through my medals, my contracts, the life I had built piece by piece. But when I pushed the door open, the smell told me otherwise: whiskey, stale sweat, the past I had outrun. And then I saw them. They were already inside. My father sat in my chair like a king on a throne, boots planted wide, a half-empty bottle sweating on the table beside him. Marcus leaned against the wall, arms folded, his smirk too familiar. Derek paced near the window, restless, like a dog that had been let off its chain but still remembered the leash. And my mother, she stood near the corner, small, silent, eyes locked on the floor as if answers might be written in the carpet. "Took you long enough," my father said. His voice hadn't aged. It still carried the same venom, the same weight. "You live fancy now, huh? Apartments, trophies, contracts. You think we don't know?" My keys trembled in my hand, but I didn't let them hear it. "Get out of my home." He laughed, a short, cruel sound. "Home? You wouldn't have one if not for me. Don't forget who raised you." "Raised?" I said, steady, though my pulse thundered. "You mean beat. You mean broke." Marcus stepped forward, his grin sharp. "Come on, T. Don't make this ugly. We're family. Family helps family." Derek added, "You've got more than enough. Just cut us in. A car. A house. Something real. You've been sending scraps to Mom for years. Don't you think it's time you step up?" I looked at her then, desperate for a flicker of defense, a whisper of truth. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. Her head dipped, her hands twisted in front of her. The silence was louder than any accusation. "She doesn't even ask," I said. "She doesn't have to," my father snapped. His hand slapped the armrest, and the bottle rattled. "You owe her. You owe me. And if you don't start paying like a real daughter, maybe she pays instead." The words were simple, but the threat in them filled the room. My stomach turned to stone. "You wouldn't." His eyes narrowed. "Wouldn't I? You remember what I can do. One word from me, one hand raised, and she'll feel it. Or maybe I'll save myself the trouble. Maybe I end her right here if you don't give me what I want." My mother flinched, just slightly, a tremor that spoke louder than his shouting. She still didn't look at me. I stepped closer, my fists tight at my sides. "You're threatening her to hurt me. That's what this is." "You're damn right," he said. "You got money? Then you buy us out of the misery you left us in. A house. A car. Cash every month. You want her safe? Then you pay." Derek's voice cut in. "We already found a place. Just need your signature." Marcus grinned wider. Think of it as insurance. You take care of us, and Mom stays fine. You say no, and he let the words trail, but the look in his eyes finished the sentence. My throat burned. I wanted to scream at her, to shake her until she remembered I was her blood, her daughter, the one who had begged her to leave. Instead, I whispered, Mom. Please. Say something. She shifted. Her lips parted. For a heartbeat, I thought the silence was about to break, that she would choose me this time. But when her eyes finally moved, they didn't rise to mine. They slid to the floor. To him. Anywhere but me. It felt like the slap all over again, only deeper. You'd let him? My voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. You'd let him use you like this? Her shoulders shook, but no words came. My father leaned forward, satisfied. See? She knows her place. And now you'll know yours. Sign the papers. Bring the money. Or you won't like what happens next. The room closed in. My trophies on the shelf gleamed in the lamplight like witnesses. The apartment I had bought with blood and speed was no longer mine, it was theirs, invaded, poisoned. I stared at my mother, searching for anything, anger, shame, love. But her eyes stayed locked on the carpet, as if the pattern there could save her. As if my face was too dangerous to see. And that was when I understood, silence was her choice. Not just then, but always. For 10 years, running had been my answer. When things turned violent, I ran. When the silence got heavy, I ran. Even when I found them in my apartment, holding my peace hostage, I wanted to run again, pack my bags, move cities, vanish into another track, another life. But this time was different. Because now I wasn't just a girl with bruises on her cheek and medals under her mattress. I was a woman with contracts, a name, and enough strength to fight back. Running wasn't the only option anymore. The night after they stormed into my apartment, I sat awake until dawn. The city hummed outside my window, but inside me it was war. I thought about the look in my mother's eyes, empty, hollow, staring at the floor instead of at me. That silence had cut deeper than any slap my father ever gave. And yet, I still couldn't hate her. Not fully. Because silence is its own prison, and she'd been locked inside it for decades. So I made a choice, if she couldn't save herself, I would. The next day, I called a hotline. It took 3 tries before I said the words out loud, my mother is a victim of domestic abuse. She's still with him. How do I get her out? On the other end of the line, the woman's voice was calm, steady. She didn't flinch, didn't rush. She explained the process, restraining orders, shelters, counselors. She told me about safe houses and rehabilitation centers designed for women who had been broken down until they forgot what freedom felt like. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just my fight, it was a system I could tap into, a network built for moments exactly like this. I started going to consultations between training sessions. I sat in small rooms with posters on the wall that read "Love shouldn't hurt," surrounded by women who spoke the language of survival in every breath. Some had broken arms. Some had scars older than their children. And every single one of them reminded me of my mother. The counselor, a woman named Renee, looked me in the eye after our 3rd meeting. Tiana, you can't carry her out like a trophy. She has to step forward herself. But you can open the door and keep it open until she does. So I planned. I waited for the right moment, watching, listening. My brothers were careless, they bragged about shifts at a warehouse, hours when they wouldn't be home. My father still spent afternoons at the bar, drowning his failures in cheap whiskey. That left small windows, brief, fragile slivers of time when my mother would be alone. One Sunday afternoon, I found her outside the corner store, carrying groceries in thin plastic bags. Her shoulders were hunched the way they'd always been, as if the world pressed down on her more than gravity ever could. I almost walked past, fear still had its claws in me, but Renee's words burned in my head, open the door and keep it open. Mom, I said. She froze. Slowly, she turned. For a second her face softened, almost like recognition, almost like love. Then it closed again, shuddered. You shouldn't be here. I had to see you. I stepped closer. Please. Just listen. I can't, she whispered, the same refrain she'd given me 10 years ago. Yes, you can, I said. I have a place. A safe place. Counselors. People who understand. You don't have to live like this anymore. Her hands clutched the grocery bags tighter, plastic straining. He'll come for me. No, I said firmly. Not this time. I talked to people. There are shelters. Lawyers. You'd be protected. Her eyes flickered, darting like a bird trapped in a cage. He'll hurt you if he finds out. He already tried, I said, voice sharp. He threatened you in my own home. He used you as a weapon against me. And I won't let it happen again. Tears welled, but she shook her head, stubborn in her chains. I've been with him my whole life. I don't know anything else. I reached out and touched her hand. Then learn something else with me. Please. I'm not here as the girl who left you. I'm here as the woman who came back to save you. One last time. Don't say I can't again. Say I will. She trembled. The grocery bag slid from her hands, apples rolling across the sidewalk. For the first time in decades, her eyes finally met mine, and stayed. Behind me, Renee stepped forward. She'd insisted on coming, standing a few feet back to let me try first. Now she spoke gently. Ma'am, it's okay to be afraid. But you don't have to do this alone. My mother's chest heaved, breath after broken breath. And then, so soft I almost didn't hear it, she said, all right. That single word was heavier than the world. We moved quickly after that. Papers were filed. A restraining order was placed. The shelter admitted her, gave her a room with clean sheets and locks that only she controlled. For the first time in my life, I saw her sit in a chair without flinching at every sound. And without her in that house, my father lost his weapon. 2 months later, their old home came up at auction. The same sagging roof, the same cracked windows, the same walls that had heard every scream and silence. I bought it in cash. The day the papers were signed, I drove there myself. My father and brothers were still inside, drunk on anger and entitlement. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I handed them the notice and told them to get out. They cursed, spat, threatened. But this time I had the law at my back. 2 officers stood beside me, and when Marcus tried to lunge forward, they shoved him right back. You can't do this, my father roared. His face was red, veins bulging. This is my house. Not anymore, I said. My voice was calm, steady as stone. You lost it the day you made it a prison. Now it's mine. They left with nothing but their rage, scattering like shadows under a rising sun. I walked through the rooms afterward, my footsteps echoing. The wallpaper still peeled, the floorboards still groaned, but the air felt lighter. I stood in the kitchen where my cheek had once burned, in the hallway where my mother had whispered I can't, and for the first time I felt no fear. It wasn't just about walls and deeds. It was about power. And now, they had none. That week, I stood beside my mother in court as the judge signed the final restraining order. My father's face twisted when the gavel struck, but he couldn't come within a mile of us anymore. Marcus and Derek too. The leash they had held around our necks snapped in two. Later, as I walked with my mother out of the courthouse, she clutched my arm. Her hand was light, frail, but steady. I don't know how to start over, she said softly. I looked at her, the woman who had chosen silence 1,000 times, but finally whispered all right when it mattered most. You don't have to know, I told her. You just have to begin. We stepped into the sunlight together. For the first time, neither of us was running. We were walking forward.